A group of people who voluntarily come together to achieve social change. So that's what a community is. And in order to do that, they need to coordinate, they need to collaborate in a very specific way. If you are thinking in our age, in our digital age, that you can create a community having a strong leader who commands and everyone who is below will follow, well, this does not really work, especially in the civil society space where we operate. So in this session of the workshop, we're going to be focusing on community building. Now, at the European Movement International, we see community building as an extension of what my previous colleagues have already told you, as an extension of this evidence-based strategic communications approach that we follow. We first, let's say, fish in a big pond of people, the so-called persuadable audiences that are more likely to respond positively to narratives about not the European Union per se, but the values that represent the European Union, such as democracy, respect for human rights, rule of law, etc. Once you fish from that bigger pond, you need to move all those people to your own pond, and this is where it starts the magic of community building. In this session, we're going to cover the fundamentals, specifically what is a community, why community building is especially relevant nowadays for civil society organizations like yours, for advocacy groups, what are the most effective strategies that you can use, or at least the one that we recommend the most at the European Movement International. And let's not forget, we're going to see some best practices from our experience, the work that we have actually done or that our partners have actually done and has worked. Some people think that a community are those who follow you on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. Well, that can be the beginning of a community, but that's not a real community. A real community is a group of people who voluntarily come together to do one of these things, sometimes all of them, but they want to get better at something. It can be a professional community. People who share the same ideas and want to meet like-minded people. This can be a social club, for example. Or the one that or the criteria that we are very interested in, people who want to achieve social change together, which is a little bit a combination of the other two, because you want to get better at mobilizing people, reaching out to decision makers, but you want to do it with people who share your values, with people who are like-minded. So that's what a community is. It's a group of people who voluntarily come together to achieve social change. And in order to do that, they need to coordinate, they need to collaborate in a very specific way. This is something that it goes beyond politics and advocacy. It's something that is happening in our society at corporate level. There are two researchers who have thought long and hard about this, and they've come up with a brutally simple representation of what's happening today. They claim that we are transitioning from what is called the old power values to the new power values. What are the old power values? Well, think about the job that your father or your grandfather had when they started. They joined a company which was hierarchical. They followed the lead and the instructions from the leader. Over time, they specialized on something. There was not really a need to collaborate because you knew your stuff, because you had been working on it for years. And there is this strong sense of we need to follow a top-down structure. The leader knows best. This also happened in politics. The values of the new power, they are completely different. Think about technology companies, think about the startups. In these companies, there is not a top-down exercise. There is not a top-down structure. Everyone joins the company with a much more horizontal structure, where everyone is an specialist of something, but you need to collaborate with someone else in order to make a product. For example, in order to create the MacBook Pro or the iPhone, a team of creatives had to sit down with a team of developers who, together with the team of sales and many, many more teams, had to collaborate into creating what we have today in our pockets, the iPhone. In those type of companies, again, the decision-making process is distributed, and the leaders, what they do is not to execute or to order or to demand certain actions, but to manage this magic, that is happening in these structures. This is also happening in the social and political space. We have seen some of the most successful movements are following the same values. For example, Fridays for Future. There is not a single leadership structure. Of course, you have public figures like Greta Thunberg, but Fridays for Future Germany is completely independent and autonomous from Greta. But even more, Fridays for Future in Berlin is different from the one in Munich, and so on and so forth. The leadership is not present in every single decision that is made in this movement. The leadership is inspirational. And then the people who join this community, they do so because they want to achieve something. In the case of Friday for Future, what they wanted to achieve is mobilization, especially from young people, to demand more urgent action from our politicians, our leaders. Now, if you think about community building, if you are thinking in our age, in our digital age, that you can create a community having a strong leader who commands and everyone who is below will follow, well, this does not really work, especially in the civil society space where we operate. What's really important in our space is that you, as an organization, as a movement, you want to define a platform to achieve certain objectives. It can be the objective of increasing turnout in the next European elections. Your objective can be to influence a specific policy at the European level. And you create that platform. So it's not about you as an organization, it's about the issue that organization cares for. And once you create that platform, other organizations and individuals will jump into that platform voluntarily because they understand that in that platform they are given the space, they are given the voice, and together you can achieve something bigger. So that's why you need to do community building these days, because that's what really drives long-lasting and positive change in our society. What strategies you need to follow when building a community? Again, this is a crash course, and we are not intending to cover everything in a lot of detail, but the most important thing for us is to follow this three-step approach. First, you need to find the people in the community. Second, you need to get them involved. And third, you need to mobilize them towards action and repeat, because that mobilization for action will bring more people who will need to get involved, who will be mobilized for action. How you find people? Well, if you have followed this workshop by my colleagues, you already know that this big pond of people that we consider persuadables and we consider audiences that could potentially be interested in topics like democracy, human rights, etc., you need to follow what my colleagues have told you to fish from that pond. Once you have them, you need a digital meeting point. It can be a website. Today there are too many channels. It can be a WhatsApp group, it can be anything. There has to be a touch point where that person starts to understand what the community is about. And here there is another very important difference with traditional top-down communications. In those traditional top-down communications, you are expected as a member of a group to be told exactly what the group is about, what is the objective, how are we gonna achieve it together, and so on. And everything is laid out in front of you. In community building, this is the opposite. What you need to do is to bring people through the door without telling too much about what's gonna happen, so that they can go to the next step, which is they are gonna get involved. Because if you think in this way, how can I get involved if you have already made all the decisions? Then we go to the second step in this approach, which is engage or get people involved. In order to do that, you've probably heard this idea of the ladder of engagement. This ladder of engagement is very simple. You need to define a set of actions that your supporters are going to follow in order to deepen their engagement with your organization. They can start with the most trivial, simple ones. For example, inviting their friends to join their community as well. And by doing that, they are already showing a small level of commitment to your community. Or maybe they start becoming multipliers on social media, something that everyone can do and that is very accessible. But then you need to start defining how this engagement with this community is going to go up and up. Maybe the next thing that they can do is to attend one of your events. That's great. You have moved that person who invited their friends to actually meeting you probably in person or maybe digitally. Then the next step is that that person organize their own event. Again, think about this distributed organizing approach. You don't need to be the one in this movement or in this community doing all the work. The people are joining your community because they want to do something. So give them things to do. And then that ladder of engagement can be as high as you need, and it can be constantly evolving. Again, it's more important here the journey and that you learn together with your community rather than you have a well thought out strategy and well thought out plan for them from the very beginning. Because again, if you have already made all the decisions, they won't feel involved. They won't feel that they will have a say. And then the last part, which is the critical one, is the reason why you started all this. There will be a time that your organization needs to mobilize because there is a referendum, there is an election, there is a legislative file that is getting into a critical timing. At that point, you need to get this community to mobilize. How you do that is really up to the cause or the movement that you're organizing. Sometimes it's street protests, sometimes it's writing to your representatives, sometimes it's being even more insistent and being more aggressive towards communicating those objectives to the friends. But this is a moment when you mobilize. Sometimes this mobilization leads to a successful outcome and leads to the disappearance of the community. But most successful movements, like the climate movement, for example, like the movement for democracy, there is always a cause. There is always one political prisoner. There is always a situation that can be improved democracy-wise. So if you get better at this, then you just need to repeat this approach. Find your people, engage them, mobilize them, and again, repeat. One of the frameworks that the European Movement International will use, it was not developed by us, it was developed by a leading digital agency called Tectonica, and they built what is called this 5-step framework. There are 2 axes, as you can see on the screen. On the vertical axis, you have the level of personalization of the communications. In the horizontal axis, you have the level of decentralization of decision making. Those organizations that have high level of decentralization of decision making and high level of personalization of the communication are organizations like Fridays for Future, are organizations like Black Lives Matter, where the smallest unit, this has autonomy, and the size and the level of personalization is almost peer-to-peer, it's almost one-to-one. In the part of the graph that is low or on both axes, low level of decentralization, low level of personalization, you have typically all the European institutions, you have all the Brussels-based organizations. Why? Because we just send our press release, we send our tweet, it's the same tweet, the same press release for everyone, and once we have done it, we lay back and say, our job is done. So if you're following this workshop, you probably already know what I'm talking about. But at the same time, you don't want to be, probably the strategy of your organization is not to become the next Black Lives Matter or the next Fridays for Future. So that's why your job as a community builder, as a community manager, is to progressively move your organization and move the movement that you are trying to create with your organization. Remember, This is not about the organization. This is about the social change and the movement that you are creating, that your organization is just part of, but it's not about your organization. And your job as a community builder is to increase the level of personalization in the communication. So probably you want to start doing things like digital advertising, where you send messages, different messages to different audiences based on what those audiences are more interested in. Not everyone enjoys or likes the same things. And where you allow a deeper level of decentralization within your organization. So you let volunteers, supporters to make decisions about the direction that the movement is taking. And if you do that, again, you don't want to be in the number one in this graph. You maybe don't want to be in the number 5, but there's a sweet spot somewhere between the 2, 3, 4 that your organization will be comfortable with, and then you will start seeing actual results from your work as a community builder. And we hope that this was interesting, and can't wait to see you at the workshop in Brussels.